Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com, and today we're going to make a hummingbird cake. This is a rich, moist, and flavorful cake that's full of pecans and ground cinnamon and pineapple and mashed bananas. And then we're going to fill and frost the cake with a cream cheese frosting that has even more pecans in it. So the first thing we're going to do is make our cake. So preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need two 9-inch round cake pans. That's 23 centimeter. And my pans are about a little shy of 2 inches tall. It's about 5 centimeters. And then you can either butter your pans, or I'm just going to spray them with one of those non-stick sprays. And then I like to line the bottom of the pan with a piece of parchment paper. That way we make sure that our cakes don't stick to the pan. So now, this is a really easy cake batter to make. I mean, you could use an electric mixer, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to use 2 bowls, one for your wet ingredients, one for your dry. You mix them together and we're done. So a nice, easy cake to make. So you will need a large bowl and have 3 cups. That's 390 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And this is a sweet cake. So we're using 2 cups, 400 grams of granulated white sugar. Some people say the name Hummingbird comes from the amount, how sweet this cake is, and that it attracts hummingbirds. Sounds good, doesn't it? And then to that I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, 6 grams of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I like to use kosher salt. You don't have to, but I find kosher salt is a little milder tasting than, say, your regular table salt. And then cinnamon, 1 teaspoon, which is about 3 grams of ground cinnamon. And what I like, I mean, cinnamon obviously adds a lot of flavor, but it also colors our batter, which I like. So now I'm just going to whisk, or you could stir it. So I want to make sure everything's mixed together, especially that baking soda, because if you don't really mix that in, you get little clumps. It will taste a little bitter, which we don't want our cake to be. And then we need some pecans, or maybe you say pecans, depending on where you live. Now we need them finely chopped, and you will need a half a cup, which is 100 grams. Now, I like to toast the pecans before I chop them, because I find that really brings out that kind of caramel flavor in them. So just put your nuts on a baking sheet and put them in your oven for about 8 to 10 minutes until, actually, you can just start to smell them, and that's when you know they're done. And then just cool them and finely chop them. I just did this by hand on a cutting board. You could put them in your food processor. Makes it a little faster, because finely chopping them did take a while. And then we're just going to mix that in. And that's our dry ingredients. So for our wet, I have another bowl. And you will need 2 cups of mashed banana, which I find, if you want to go by weight, that would be about 400 grams, because I find, so you need about, it depends on the size of your banana, but a medium-sized banana is about 100 grams per half a cup, so therefore you need about 400 grams. Now you could mash them, we got to mash them, so you can just mash them with your hands, which I a lot of times do, or you can just use a fork. And you want to make sure, if you noticed, I didn't say, you want them ripe. And that means, you know, they're kind of soft with a lot of those brown spots. Because if you ever noticed when the skins are just yellow, bright yellow, they're a little firmer textured, and we want them nice and soft. And also, as they ripen, they get sweeter tasting, which will add even more sweetness to this cake. It is a sweet cake. So you want to cut it into small pieces when you're serving it. Okay, that looks good. You could also do this, mash them in your food processor if you want it, but just make sure you don't process them too much so they become water. So like that, and then we need 3 large eggs and have them at room temperature, and then just lightly beat them like I've done here, just to break them up. And then we need some flavoring, even more flavor for this cake, 1½ teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. If you don't want a vanilla flavor, you can just leave it out. And then we need some crushed pineapple. I'm using 1 8-ounce can by weight, that's about 225 grams of crushed, you want crushed pineapple, and we're going to put everything, the juice, the whole can. No need to drain. And then you will also need, now what's great about this, we're not using butter, we're using a flavorless oil in this cake, which means if you want to refrigerate the cake, it won't get really firm like when you put a butter cake in the fridge. So you will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 milliliters of a flavorless oil. So that means vegetable, corn, canola, safflower, or you could even use a light olive oil. Whatever you have in the house. And then mix all that together. This is such an easy cake, which, you know, sometimes it's nice to not have to pull out the mixer and beat a lot. Okay, so that's that. And then we're just going to pour, let's make a little bit of a well, the wet into the dry. And mix it together, and we're done. Now if you're not, I mean, you could do this in your mixer, but make sure you get to the bottom because we want all that flour moistened. But you don't want to over mix because then the cake could end up being a little tough, which of course we don't want. So just keep that in mind. Almost there. As you can see, on the bottom, there's still lots of flour. Okay, as you can see, this is really thick. A lot of good stuff in here. So now, I'm happy with that. So now we have our pans. Try to divide this evenly. Try to lift this bowl because I can tell you it's a little heavy with this batter. Now you can just, you know, kind of eyeball it. But if you have a scale, which I recommend you get, because I like to weigh my ingredients actually, I'm going to weigh the 2 pans, and that way I can make sure it's an even amount. Of course, you have to make sure that your pans originally weigh both the same amount. Otherwise, the math gets a little hard. Well, I'm a little light on this one. So this is why it's good, because you want to make sure that you have about the same amount, although I'm not that bad here. That way they'll bake in about the same amount of time. That's about right. So, and then just smooth the top, either with an offset spatula, even it out, or you could just use the back of a spoon. So now we're going to bake our cakes. Now, as I always say, everybody's oven is a little different. I find somewhere around the 25 to 30 minute, but you know, you might want to check a little before that just to make sure. And they will rise and they will turn a beautiful golden brown, and a toothpick inserted in the center will just come out clean. Okay, so our cakes are now done. So just put them on a wire rack. You can see, nice, beautiful golden brown, firm to the touch, and a toothpick insert in the center comes out clean. So I'm just going to let them cool in the pans on the rack for about 10 minutes, and when we come back, we'll take them out of the pans. So now we're ready to take our cakes out of the pan. So just take either a spatula or even a knife, just run it around the inside just to make sure it's not sticking. And then take another rack, and then we're just going to flip it, like so. And if you use parchment, just gently peel that off. And then we're going to flip it back onto the rack. And we're going to let these completely cool, and when we come back, we'll start our cream cheese frosting. So now for our cream cheese frosting. If you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer, or really you could just mix this by hand if you want to. So the first thing you need is a 1/4 cup, which is 55 grams of butter, and have that at room temperature. And then I'm just going to beat my butter on medium speed just to get it nice and smooth. Okay, and now I'm going to add 1 8-ounce package, which is 225 grams of, I'm using a full fat cream cheese, and again, have that at room temperature. And then I'm just going to beat the butter and the cream cheese on medium speed just until it gets nice and smooth and creamy. Okay, that looks good. So I'm gonna scrape the bottom and the sides, make sure everything gets mixed in together. And now I'm going to add a little flavoring, vanilla extract. So 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And I'm just going to beat that in. Okay, it looks good. And we're going to now add 1 pound, 450 grams, which is about 4 cups of confectioner's sugar. You may know that as powdered or icing. You can actually buy 1 pound boxes of confectioner's sugar, which makes it easy. You don't have to measure. And you need to sift your powdered sugar because you know, it always has lumps. So I'm just using a strainer. I mean, you can use, if you have one of those actual sifters, you could use that. And now I'm going to add this gradually because that's a lot of sugar, and if I put it all in, it'll make quite a mess. So I'm just going to add a bit, beat that in, and then just keep doing that until it's all incorporated. And have your mixer on low speed when you start because you don't want that flying up in your face. Right off. So now I'm just going to give my bowl a quick stir here, make sure everything's mixed in. This is quite a thick frosting. which is fine because, you know, the cakes are quite dense, so it can handle a thicker frosting. Okay, and the rest. I'm just going to beat this just to get some air into it. Okay, that looks good. So this is what you're looking for, nice, creamy, smooth, and then just beat it a bit so you get some air and it's nice and light and fluffy. Just get a quick scrape. What we need next is we're going to add even more pecans to this, to our frosting. So you will need a half a cup, 100 grams of finely chopped pecans. And again, I did toast my the pecans because it just really brings out that caramel flavor. And I didn't show you before, but if you don't have like a food processor or a little nut chopper, I mean, I always do it by hand. So just put your nuts on your cutting board and have, you know, a pretty large knife. And what I do is I put the heel of my hand like that, and then I just like keep it stationary at the point here, and then just move your knife like this. I find that's the easiest way to chop really any nuts. So that's just a little tip there. Now, I know some people have a hard time finding pecans, or they're very expensive. I mean, the reason this is a hummingbird cake, and it was originated in the southern US, where pecans grow. But if you can't find them or they're too expensive, you know, walnuts would be a really good substitute. You know, you won't have quite that caramel flavor, but still really good. So I'm just going to beat the nuts in. And that's it. Oh, what a great frosting. It's going to be really good. So now what I'm going to do is just clean up. And when we come back, we will put our cake together. So now we're ready to frost our cake. So if you have a turntable like I have here, you could use that, makes it easier. Or you could just put the cakes right on your serving platter or plate. So I like to use one of these cake circles. They're just cardboard. You can get them at cake decorating stores or online or places like Michael's and Joann's, because that way if you want to move the cake, it's easier to move with a cardboard round. And so what you do is just, you know, put your cake on there like so. And then I'm just going to put, so it doesn't move around. Hate to waste that frosting on here, but I need it to stick. So hopefully that'll stay. And then we're going to put like maybe a third of the frosting, just a thin layer, because, you know, this is a pretty rich cake. It doesn't need that much frosting. It's got a lot of flavor. So, and then just spread it. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? The colors are very nice of the cake and the frosting, all those nuts. Okay, looks good. Don't worry if it goes over the edge, because we're going to frost the whole thing. Just a little over there. Okay, and then, of course, Now, if you wanted a flat top cake, you could flip them and have the bottoms on top. That's kind of like the professionals do, but I actually like it to look like I made it. So I like a little dome on the top of my cake. But whichever way. So now we're going to, if you just wanted to frost the top and not the sides, you could do that. It's kind of a more casual look to your cake. So now this is a thick frosting, so it's a little harder to spread. Okay, so we're almost done here. Looks good. And if you want, you can just kind of tilt your spatula and then at an angle and then just run it. If you want really smooth sides, you just kind of go around like that. And then of course, if you want, you can just do the same on the top. But I kind of like it a little rough. And then decorating. If you want, I mean, I think it looks great as it is. You could do some more chopped nuts on top, or you could just use the whole pecans and just kind of put them around like so. And now I like it just like that, but you know, if you know some cakes you buy, they have the nuts on the bottom. Now, professionals tend to lift up the cake on that cake circle and tilt it, and I'm not comfortable with that because I always think it's just going to fall right over. So I'm going to just take my a big spatula and I'm going to just lift it and then like so, and then put some nuts with the spoon. As far as you feel comfortable lifting, or you could just take your hand and just press it on the side, because you can lift this cake up pretty good, and then just go around. And you might want to have some parchment paper under there if that's what you want to do, but you know what, I think it just looks great like this. And so let's cut a piece. Now, this is a, this is a rich tasting cake, so you might want to cut it in fairly thin slices. And still quite soft, so, whoops, you could refrigerate this cake, because like I said, with oil in the cake, it keeps it soft even when refrigerated, but that way the frosting will firm up a bit if you refrigerate it. Oh. Doesn't that look gorgeous? So good. Okay, let's try it. Got to have that frosting. That's delicious. It's very moist from all that, pineapple and oil and mashed bananas. Sweet, but not, you would think it'd be really sweet, and it isn't. And then that frosting, cream cheese, great combination. So make it and enjoy. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.